Wow, I'm so happy here to have another author interview. And today the author is Yoshito Darmon Shimamori, and he is the author of The Parent's Guide to Raising Multi-literate Children. What a great book. You know, a lot of times we think about teaching kids multiple languages and we focus on speaking and understanding the comprehension. But when you are taking your kids on a different level, reading and writing are something crucial for the development of your children's bilingual ability. So welcome, Yoshito. Thank you so much for taking time to join me today.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for inviting me.
Oh, we're so excited. So I would like to know where you are located and, well, how did this all start? Yeah, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I live just outside London in England. And so the idea of the book is really based on my own experience and needs growing up. So I'm half French and half Japanese. I grew up in France and I learned to read and write in Japanese in a supplementary school. And also later I had 6 hours of Japanese in my curriculum from 11 to 18. It was quite a lot of struggle. And that's why so through this pain, I didn't want my children to feel the same. And because I'm a teacher as well, I have the knowledge of how to teach things. So I was able to apply to my sons, and I documented this on Instagram, and I saw that it was quite something that people would need help with. And I thought, but I can just, instead of just doing it on Instagram, which is quite restrictive in a way, why not put everything in a book? And that's why I wrote this book.
Yes. So I think a lot of times we are learning from our own learning experience and we would like to make it easier for our children. So you talk about you grew up actually bilingually, right? Your 2 languages,
Yeah.
French and Japanese.
Yeah.
So the background is, so now your own family, so how many language your children are exposed to, or how many language are they learning at this time?
So my wife is Korean, and I'm speaking to them in French. So they speak French, Korean, and English. English is from the school. Like if you come to our home, you hear English as well because our son's strongest language is English. So they tend to play together in English. Yeah.
Right. So the community language is English, and
Yeah.
the home languages are basically from you is French, and from your wife is Korean.
That's it.
How do you arrange the time, or do you use one parent, one language method? Or how do you combine all 3 languages in your daily life?
So yeah, we're following mainly the OPPO method. So like you said, one parent, one language. So I just interact with them in French. So I speak to them 100% in French. Maybe for homework, I switch to English, but otherwise it's like just French. My wife does the same with Korean. And I don't really speak Korean, but she speaks French. So we speak together in French.
And so I would like to go back a little bit about your own learning when you were a child. How did your parents do when you were when you were growing up with 2 languages? How does that work? Is also OPPO?
Yeah, so it started actually as minority language at home. So my dad is French, but he learned a bit of Japanese, and with babies, you don't need to know much. So up to when I started school, so they were speaking to me just in Japanese. And when I was about 3, apparently I was complaining that my dad didn't understand what I was saying in Japanese. So he switched to French. And so then it became open. So my dad was speaking French with me and my mom Japanese.
So it's like the growing situation. And then how old are your kids right now?
5, and the eldest just turned 8.
Okay. So during this this whole journey up till now, the multilingual journey, what are the most awarding thing for you? Like you have seen so far?
So I guess they're still young, but what I enjoy, like the rewards, is maybe to see them communicate with everyone in the family, to have fun with their cousins, and not having any trouble with that. But also, like, because I don't really speak Korean, they help me with the family translating, and so that's something that's rewarding. Also, maybe another thing is to see that even at that age, they're able to get the benefit from being able to speak and understand three languages. And at their age, for example, when they watch a cartoon on YouTube, so they like Miraculous, and it's in French, Korean, and English. And when sometimes they find an episode in French, they watch it in French, sometimes in Korean, sometimes in English, and they can watch a lot more than if they understood one language. So for them, I guess it's a benefit, and it's good to see that they can benefit from that already.
Just observing that, it's very rewarding to see how they choose a language to watch the same cartoon but in different languages.
Yeah.
So that's good to see, how they are developing and feel the multiple languages, the multilingual is a part of their lifestyle because you are creating for them. And
Yeah.
are there any struggles maybe earlier, have you had any like challenges, when you first started this whole journey?
So I guess growing up bilingual, at the beginning, I didn't have much challenges or doubts. I think the first one I got was when because we were just speaking French and Korean at home, my eldest didn't have any English in his environment. And when he was like 2.5, so we were thinking of him going to school, to nursery. And I was worried that he wouldn't understand anything. So I was wondering, do I need to speak to him in English a bit? Do I need to teach him some key sentences to get by? And my wife, who grew up monolingual, was much more relaxed and said, no, but kids don't really need to talk anyway. They just play together. And I said, okay, so we stick to French and Korean. And indeed, like when he went to school, he was playing with everyone. So that was reassuring. There was a slight problem, mainly because when the teacher was giving instructions to the class, my son was actually following what the others were doing, but the teacher was thinking that he understood. And when she was speaking to him directly, uh, like sometimes he didn't understand. So he was just doing his own thing, and she took it as him ignoring her. So then we had to talk to the teacher and explain that it's probably not that he's ignoring her, but more that he doesn't understand. And we explained that he was actually following the others, which happened like we would see this in the park, etc. And then, so she understood this a bit more. So she was making more gestures, etc. when she was talking to him. And we taught him as well some key instructions. So we discussed with the teacher and said, what kind of instruction does he need to understand? And she gave us a small list. So we went through this at home with games like Simon Says type of games. And then it was fine. So that was maybe one worry we had. And at the moment, we are facing another one, which is actually knowing the balance between how much English we allow from them. Because now, so their English is getting stronger and stronger. And so they tend to speak more and more to us in English. We still reply in our language, but they tend to speak in English. So it's like, how much do we need to? So at first, I was thinking, okay, how do I make them speak French or Korean? And then I just switched the question to how can they want to speak French and Korean? And it's about creating this environment where basically their brain is not in the English mode, but switches back to the French and Korean mode. And so and for them, I guess it's the way we can create this is by putting cartoons in our languages so that they have it in their head, because they reenact the cartoons often, so they speak in that language. And when we read, so we try to read more in our languages, so present books saying, oh yeah, maybe this book could be interesting for tonight, and we start reading it. Because generally we give them the choice, so just bring a book you want to read, and if it's in English, we read it in English. If it's in French or Korean, we read it in that language. We don't really impose a language, but now we're trying to give them a choice of the minority language so that they are a bit more exposed to the minority language. And yeah, like their brain switches back to English and French and Korean.
Because I think the kids, when they start school, the community language, and for you and well, for me at the same time, it's all English.
Yeah.
So they spend so much time in the English mode, and I love what you say that. So they need to, when they come home, they need some time to switch back to the minority languages at home.
Yeah.
And I love how you provide them the choice of the books they want to read, and encourage them to focus on the minority language. But at the same time, you pointed out, I think this is something very important. Should you encourage them to use the minority languages, or you want to help them to want to, that's a very important word, want to use the minority language. So your book, it's so important. I know it is for reading and writing, but basically your book actually is going to lead them on this way. And there was over 70 activities that you are sharing in the book was the readers. So that is something, is that how you started the idea for this book? The Parents' Guide to Raising Multi-literate Children?
Yeah, so I thought as well, I grew up bilingual. I went to a supplementary school. I am a teacher, but even with that, I struggled at the beginning. So if there is a parent who grew up monolingual, for example, or is not a teacher or doesn't have a teaching background, they have even more doubts than me. And so the idea, like the moment it clicked in my head is when I saw that my son didn't want to learn with me. So I was doing games, etc. with him, but it was still heavily focused on literacy. It was quite obvious that the purpose of it was to read and write. But because I don't spend that much time with them, so during the day I'm teaching, I just see them a few hours at night, and on the weekend, that's when we spend time together. But so they didn't want to waste this time studying. They wanted to just play with their dad. So I tried to combine them, to combine the games with the literacy by making a heavier focus on the game, the fun activities, and just including a bit of literacy to help them enjoy it. And I think my teaching background helped me do that, because I was trained, in a method where we actually use the situation, the here and now, to encourage the students to speak in the target language. And so I just transferred that into my parenting role as well, with a few twists. And that's what I included in the book. So how to stay basically a parent, have lots of fun, but so for you, it's still your aim is still to teach your child to read and write, but for your child, it still appears as a game. So they would be more willing to carry on with the fun activities.
Yeah. Can you expand the idea of a here and now? because you talk about you are trained with the method, you know, the
Yeah,
situation over here and now. I think maybe a lot of our audience
yeah.
would be very interesting to understand that a little bit more.
So what I was taught to do when I teach is to actually get the students to want to speak French or Spanish. So for example, what we do in class is we generally have two teams and they compete against each other. But if they speak English, they give points to the other team. And if they speak French or Spanish, they get points for their team. Then we do games, so they find it fun. And so in these games, we include repetition to improve the pronunciation, the knowledge of the grammar. And it's all, so through, not all, most through games. And still some activities are traditional, but when they understand that in the classroom, they speak in the target language, and to do it is rewarded, they love it. And also we teach them how to, so one of the first things we teach them is the classroom rules. So for example, we must speak in French, we must raise our hand in order to speak. And that kind of sentences taught in French or Spanish, they were able to use them so they gain control on the situation. So if someone is speaking English, can say, oh no, we must not speak in English, we have to speak in French. And then they get rewarded. And so first they learn some structures that they can then adapt to other contexts. And they can see that what they say have an impact on the environment. And that's empowering. And that's why they want to keep on talking that language. So it's the same logic adapted to reading and writing in this book.
Yeah, so basically you have the environment set up in a way that this is the environment for you to speak
Yeah,
the target language,
yeah,
whatever language that is. And actually, it's a great way for parents to transfer this idea to have it at home.
yeah,
And I think that's a really fun. And then even though you are teaching, but for the kids' mind, they're playing a game, and
yeah,
they're playing a game with the rules you set up. So
yeah,
that is something, you know, can kind of like a control group, like okay, this is what we do here, okay?
yeah.
And how old are your students? I'm curious.
Though it's in secondary school, so the youngest are 11 and the oldest are 16.
Okay, so these are the kids, they already, no matter what language they speak at home, they are learning French or Spanish as a second language or third language.
Yeah,
So if this works for older kids, definitely you can work, you know, with the younger kids. So
yeah.
we want to see your book because, you know, a lot of activities. So can you show us the book?
So
Maybe
that's
yes.
the book. It's in the background as well, but it's a bit small, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is the parent's guide to raising multi-literate children. Literacy is something not just we're talking about, you know, for our first language, but also, you know, now we're talking about if kids are multilingual.
Yeah,
So I love the way your book is organized. You start with something very simple, just words. It's
yeah.
not intimidating, just words. And then you go to, you know, short sentences and then text and writing. Can you give us an orientation, like a tour about your book, like how you arrange the book and how parents or educators can use this book, you know, at their advantage and help the children?
Yeah. So there are 3 chapters, and the first one is to give the basics. So before you think of starting to teach your child to read and write, you need to understand what the minority language, reading and writing the minority language represents for your child and how it transfers to the environment as well. So for example, one thing, the big difference between the minority language and the majority language is that when you start to learn to read in the majority language, you have everything around you. You have adverts, you have like on TV, or if you want to like you're eating cereals in the morning, on the box it's written in the majority language. You have all of this where you can actually practice, but because it's just random, you're never told off for reading it incorrectly. You just praise if you're reading properly. If you're not reading properly, you help to read it properly. And for the minority language, because it's such there is so much less exposure, generally it becomes more important, and we tend to focus too much on what's correct or not. And so it's giving this understanding to parents and educators about the difference between learning to read in the majority language and a minority language. And also, when you learn to read in a language, you can transfer a lot of skills from one language to another. So if, for example, your child can only already read in the majority language, there is a lot that's being done for you, and you just need to be able to leverage the right things to transfer to your language. So I put all of that in the first chapter. And then the second chapter, I give, second chapter is more about how to start. So how to introduce like the really first steps, how you can do that with your own language. And then the rest of the book is 70 plus activities to first to learn to read, to decipher words. Then we're going to short sentences, and then like paragraphs. So step by step. And maybe I'll send you a screenshot. But so I tried to organize all the activities on 2 pages so that everything is in. You can have a look at everything in one go. And the thing I really wanted to include to help parents is to understand why an activity is helpful. Because sometimes you know an activity, so you know, okay, this activity worked for that child, you find it on YouTube or something, and you try to do the same, but it doesn't work for your child, and you start wondering why. If you understand why the activity is helpful, you can adapt it to your child's needs, and you're able to spot better what the problem is. And also, for each activity, you have a part. I'll send you a screenshot, but it's about, so the variations of the activity, you have the support section and challenge section. So each activity is like basically the average level. If your child is not there yet, you can look at what kind of support you can offer them. And if they're already there and it's a bit too easy, how can you challenge them? So you have 70 plus activities, but if your child really likes something, sometimes it might feel like, okay, but that's too easy for you. So you know how you can level up the activity, and you can carry on using the same activity with different texts or different stories, etc. Yeah, so it's really, I tried to give as much as possible of the teacher knowledge I had to adapt to the minority language so that parents know what to do and why they do it.
One thing you talk about, I think is so interesting, talking about cereal boxes and things you see there might all be in the community language. I think we all experience that. And that is very challenging. But at the same time, you're talking about how to create a target language text-rich environment. So that's where you can create at home. And then I think that's we talk about that a lot, because it is important to have, if you are speaking, for example, for me, Chinese, or for you, French and Korean, you would like to have a place that you can see those words. So those things are relevant to your kids. They need that. Make them feel they actually have the need to do that. And the games that you have provided, I like the layout of the book, because I think the most important thing is you have it like, okay, if maybe it's too easy for your child, then see what you can do. Or if it's a little bit level is a little bit over your child, then how can you kind of like level down a little bit, but with the same idea. You have some examples. I'm just going to use one or two, like a tic-tac-toe. We all know that. And a hangman. Can you give us an example? How do you play tic-tac-toe? If with the younger kids, maybe just words, and then how would you level up with like maybe older students, or older kids, so they don't feel like, oh well, I have played this before, And is there any ideas you can share with the audience?
So yeah, with the tic-tac-toe, you can start at really the letter or symbol, like character level. So for example, if a child is learning another language, another script, first they have to be familiar with it. So you can just put letters. So you can put letters and then make sure that they make up a word. So that after they're able to write it, and it's not just random letters. So you can start with this, and what you can do is that when they want to put the circle or the cross, they have to read the letter properly. You can do that with words as well, or sentences. So for example, you can put a short sentence, and they have to read it correctly to be able to put the circle and cross. If you want to be a bit more challenging, you can say, if it's not read properly, you can't put the circle or the cross. And you can make them, so if they make a mistake, it's going to be frustrating. So I guess it's better if you start by making a mistake and they spot the mistake. And because they spot the mistake, first they're happy and we stick more in their head. Yeah, so you can start with like characters and then go on to sentences. For longer things, it wouldn't really apply, but yeah, that's an example of how to adapt it.
Yes, I like how you say it. Say you make a mistake. The parents or the teacher can make the mistakes and let the kids catch you, and they'll feel so happy. Well,
Yeah.
that is actually true. So I also use a lot of that. Can you give us a couple more ideas like parents can use right away?
Just one more thing I want to say about tic-tac-toe. So sometimes it might feel a bit like, why would I read the character? I can just put the circle there. But if you, for example, you have grandparents living somewhere else and you play on video call, the grandparent can't draw the circle or the cross, so they have to read, and then so the grandparent can read on the other side of the screen, and the child would put the circle or the cross. So they have to spot which character, which word they read to be able to put the cross. So that helps them understand the needs of reading these characters and words. Another activity I can share that's quite easy to do is like a memory game. But you know, the traditional memory game, you have two similar pictures and you have to find them. And when you get a pair, you keep the cards. So here you keep a picture on one card and you write the word on the other card. So let's say it's cat. So the picture of a cat and the word cat. And if they turn it, they can see the picture of the cat and they have to read the word. If it says dog, they understand it doesn't match, so they have to put it back down. But if it says cat, it makes a pair and they can keep it. So that's another thing that makes reading like relevant. Like, why would they read? Because if they can't read, they don't know if it's a match or not.
Yes.
Another activity that my sons like, that's not true. So you basically write something about your child's day. So for example, you went to the park and the weather was really nice, but you write, today we went to the park and it was raining. And they can see that it was raining is wrong, so that they can spot this mistake or the fact that it's not true and correct it, so rewrite it. So if you start with this, it's good to start with things that they can recognize very easily if they're still not very comfortable reading. So it can be names, numbers, or things that they can read easily, and they can spot very quickly that it's a mistake. And then you put a few others that are a bit more tricky. But yeah, so because it's about them, they'll be more engaged emotionally to read the text and spot whatever lie you included in the text.
Well, the focus is on them. How important that is. The learning, you are their learning partner. I always say parents are their kids' learning partner. You need to focus on the kids because that's something very important for them to feel comfortable, feel safe, feel they can do it. So sometimes I will say less is more. So like the example you just gave, give them things they know already and then add a little bit more. Because the language is a lot of practice. The more they hear it, the more they practice it, the more they see it, they can acquire the language. So teaching reading is actually challenging sometimes because they don't see those words around. And then with the tool of your book, I think they will think the reading can be a lot of fun. Even when they are spotting a few words they know, they can feel very excited. I think that's the idea. So what should parents do when they first start teaching their kids reading? Because sometimes people will think, oh, it's very intimidating. So for younger kids, what would you recommend, parents to use this book to help them to get started? Should they use flashcards? A lot of parents, they say, oh, we'll use flashcards. Then they only know the words. But then later on, you talk about sentences and short sentences. So what strategy would you recommend or tip you have for the parents when they just starting?
Leverage as much as possible the language they know already. So they know words, they just don't know how to read them. And you can use the fact that they know the words to be able to guide them. So for example, let's take the example of a cat. So you can use the same set of picture and words, and you can put like 4-6 cards of animals that maybe you can ask your child to pick, so it's more personal. And you have the 6 words below, and they know, for example, my son can read English, and when I introduced French, I did a lot of that. So he could, for cat, for example, he knows that the C is pronounced que or se in English, and in French it's the same. So that's something you don't need to teach. So, and that's something they can use to work out how to read the words, because there are 6 possibilities, 6 words. If there is a word that starts with the letters that they know it starts when they say it, they can already match them. And when I did that with Korean, so it was a bit more tricky. I started by putting a card with the picture and the word, and then the word on its own, and I asked him to match the word, so to recognize the different script, basically. Because at the beginning, it's quite tricky, like if it's really different, it's really tricky to see what's similar, what's different, because there is so much. On my Instagram, I made 3 videos about how I introduce Korean. So if anyone is interested, they can just click on the IGTV section. It's explained in more details. But yeah, so 2 things is first to leverage the language they know, so the spoken words, and then to also let them work things out. So they don't need to know 100% before they can read something. They can know like 80% and see work out what the word is, because they know how to say the word. They just pick a few letters and they work out what the rest means.
And then I feel that when you are teaching them, even just starting, it's kind of like to build them, can help them to build their confidence the way you said it, because you want them to realize that they know how to read. Use very simple examples, like you provided all the C's, and there's one, they will look at it and say, oh, I know this one. And so they feel comfortable and they feel they're more confident to do that. That's always very important. So they will want to come back for more. So that's basically very important. How about for older kids, if they are trying to learn to read in a more advanced level, for example, longer sentences and even writing, because from reading to writing there's a difference. So what can you share with us, what would be the best way to do that, the transition?
So I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that the older children get, the faster they understand things, they can understand pattern, they can transfer things more easily from one context to another. So that's going to be very helpful for them to learn how to read and write, especially if they can speak it already. And then when you said, so how can they, so about longer sentences, you mean like they can decipher things, but they are not comfortable reading longer sentences?
Yes.
So in that case, I would go step by step and just showing, so building up their confidence and showing them that they can actually read quite a lot. And even if it's with your help at the beginning, they can decipher quite a lot, understand quite a lot. And by building this confidence, they'll be able to go further. And so in this book, I used quite a few activities that I use in class as well. So I know they work with children who are like 16 years old and they really like it. So games work as well with older children. It's not just for younger children.
Yes. I think the games is a way to relax everybody. I think,
Yeah.
and then when they are relaxed, I think that the learning is better. The way they learn better when they are more relaxed and they are having fun.
And and when they
So
see that they can make mistakes and it doesn't really matter.
yeah, and so it's really interesting that for kids who don't have another language at home because you're teaching, so a lot of times your students, they don't have another language at home, they are learning either French or Chinese or Korean as a second language. Can the parents also use this book to help their kids?
So I would say, so it depends on the aim of what they want to read and write.
Yes.
So for this book, I really tailored it for multilingual children. So the way I approach activities is like they know already how to say the word, they just don't know how to read it. For example, if it's as a foreign language, the still activities work because I use many in my classes as well. You just need to twist a bit the activity. So for example, okay, so one activity is based on the Connect 4 game.
Yes.
So you have to have 4 counters in a row, and you can put a word at the top. So in order to put the counter, you have to read the word properly. And the same, you can do it over video call. But so for example, if someone is learning to speak, they might not know the word already. So instead of focusing on the reading and writing first, I would focus first on knowing the word. So I would put pictures at the top instead of words. And so the child would have to remember how to say these words. And you can have on the side the words written in that language. So that's practicing remembering the words, but also reading if necessary. And so practicing the reading at the same time.
I think it's use the visual and then the audio, oral, put them all together to reinforce their learning. And then if they even write it, and actually you're using your hands, so kind of use the 5 senses and then the motor skill to try to help them to memorize everything.
And so these games are also based on repetition. So the child, because they would have to put the counter in the same place many times, or they would see the same words written many times, it's reinforcing how to read and write or how to say the word. It's not just once and it's done. It's many, many times. And because the purpose is to win the game, for example, in that case, they would read it over and over again.
It's always a lot of fun when you play a game. And then I know, in addition, you're working on a project to accompany your book, The Parent's Guide to Raising Multi-literate Children. You are going to have the resource packs for parents. Can you talk about that? Yeah.
So the resource pack really came to my mind when I was nearly finished with the book, just because I realized that there was loads of ideas, but it can take time to create the resources. So I know that when you see your child enjoying an activity, you're more likely to carry on and think, okay, he or she enjoyed that, so let's do other things next week or tomorrow, whatever. But if you have to go through the process of having to create resources without really knowing if it's going to work, it can be quite, it's like another obstacle. So I thought I would create a resources pack where there, so for example, there are lots of games with cards. So I created 408 pairs of cards with words and pictures, just to be able to vary the cards you use. There are templates as well for different activities. So for example, there is one called, it's again where you have a text. You have to read the text to know how you're going to color the picture. And so here in the book, I gave a very short example. That's a longer one, but it's for the parents to see as well how they can organize the activities. And because sometimes one example in the book might not be enough. If they have already others they can start with and they can see the impact on their child, they're going to be more likely to do it again. And also it will help them understand how to organize the activity. So it's both giving them the material to do something and the example for them to create their own things as well, to personalize it to their children.
Yes, that will be very helpful because you have the book, you read about the activities, and then now you have the resource pack. You can, so I believe it's going to be online, so people can purchase and download. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's going to be on my website. And so I'm done with the French pack. I'm nearly done with the English pack. There'll be one in Spanish, one in Japanese, one in Korean.
Wow.
And also one where things will be editable so people can change it to their own languages.
Okay, so the parents, they have the book and they can use this resource pack, well, multilingual resource pack, and they will be able to just download and just like you showed us, almost like a play sheet, a worksheet, and they can just have fun with it and read. And then I like the idea. So it can save time for the parents and they don't need to create those resources. They can just go online and download them and use them right away.
Yeah.
Are those all printable? So do you have like audio or visual resources as well?
So I'm going to include videos as well to explain how to use the activities, how they can adapt them. So it's really providing an example and they can use it or tailor it to their needs or their child's needs.
Yes.
And also I added 2 extra activities that are on PowerPoint, so they're all editable. And again, in the videos, I explain how to edit the file. So it can be, so even if, for example, it's not in your language, you can change the language in the words you have. Yeah, so it's really trying to give something that's almost like they can take it and start straight away. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yoshito, for your book and the resource and all the tips and ideas you have given us. Book again, Yoshito's new book, The Parent's Guide to Raising Multi-literate Children. We want to see your book again. And so parents, they are available online on Amazon right now. And do a search, and most importantly, I want to know that where our audience or your readers can find you. The one most important place you want them to connect with you.
So it's on Instagram, and if you type multilingual_dad, so multilingual dad, you find me. And I have created a website that's more at the moment information about my book. Later on, I'll add other things. But if you want ideas at the moment, I would direct people to Instagram.
Super. And we will have everything in the show notes and also under the description. So you will be able to find Yoshito and to see how he is using his book on, in the daily life, and also all the activities and advice he has for you, because there are so many interesting things, interactive and encouraging words for parents. So thank you